Hello. If we consider that the first lectures on the sufficiently general theory of governance, read 2 years ago, were the beginning of the first course, then with some hard work we got to the end of the second course. And today there will be the first lecture devoted to the economy as an object of governance. But the lecture is precisely in the cycle Biospheric social economic system as an object of governance, but not by itself. Because if we talk about the economy, then first of all, we have to preliminarily agree and decide on the scientific methodological basis, on the basis of which we will consider and evaluate everything related to the economy, both at the micro and macro levels. The methodological basis is the sufficiently general theory of governance. It is sufficiently general because, in principle, it allows any process in nature, in society, in technology, to be interpreted, that is, to be presented, as a process of governance or as a process of self-governance. Thanks to this, it can take on the role of an instrument of interdisciplinary communication and be the common language of narrowly specialized professionals in different spheres of activity. You also need to realize that if a person is governarially literate, then he sees differently many processes that take place in life. And where someone sees a blind, meaningless spontaneity, a governarially literate person can see governance, including alien, hostile governance. A governarially illiterate person will not see anything except the factors that impact him, interfere with his life, or create some comfort on account of the fact that they interfere with the life of other people. Again, the economy is interesting to many, but at the level of the wallet, their own wallet, how to fill it so that there is enough for everything. At the enterprise level, that is, how to govern the enterprise so that it does not go bankrupt, this is already a narrower circle of carriers of interests. Well, there are very few people who are interested in the economy as a large social system in which the entire population of the country participates in one way or another, and which is part of the global economy. The national economy, well, you can't say the national, but the multinational economy of mankind. However, if we turn to almost everything that surrounds us, that we use in everyday life, this is a product of collective labor. And not just a product of collective labor, but very often now, it is a product of a transnational unification of labor. I emphasize, not a division of international labor. There can be a technological, operational division of a certain technological process, but this is a unification of labor. Because it is precisely as a result of the unification of labor that many products appear that we use, products that we eat, that provide us a certain personal protection, thanks to the means of an artificial habitat that isolated us from nature. Therefore, thanks, it's in quotation marks. Nevertheless, if you look again at the economy, how the country's economy functions, a lot of people are dissatisfied. Very few people think that they know what needs to be done in order for everything to be good. I will remind those who survived perestroika that the Democrats were confident that they knew what to do about the economy in order for everyone to feel good. But there were people who knew that exactly this was not supposed to be done because it would be worse. However, if society lives thoughtlessly, then the most promoted people are authoritative people. They are promoted as the result of PR technologies, but not at all because they express some knowledge that was not previously in the culture, which every thinking person can evaluate and find useful or point out mistakes. During the years of perestroika, everyone hung on the words of Aganbegyan, Gaidar, Yavlinsky, and many others. But few people thought about what the economy is and how it is connected with nature and social organization. The connections with nature and the social organization of the economy are such that there is no solution to economic problems isolated exclusively in the field of economy and finance. The solutions to all economic problems are conditioned by biospheric and social factors. Therefore, the course was structured this way. The biospheric social economic system has an object of governance. And at first we dealt with questions related to the economy, not directly, but indirectly. Because if we turn to the economy directly, then there is an organizational technological complex, and people who work in this organizational technological complex, who maintain it, and as a result we get this or that product. The product as a final product, which is consumed by households and people, and an intermediate product, which is consumed directly in the production sphere, either as raw materials and components for the production of the final product, or, in the intermediate product, along with raw materials and components, what is called investment products, which is consumed by this very organizational technological complex of the state economy, is included. Since without the consumption of investment products, it simply degrades, as a result of which there will be devastation in the country. Well, as it is said in the classic, disruption always begins in the heads, and only then moves to the closets and to all other spheres of life. And if you turn to history, even recent history, about 50 to 70 years ago, well, what happened right before World War II and right after it? Let's see. The technologies themselves, the construction of cars, aircraft engines, means of weapons, all the warring countries had this almost the same. What was in our country? What was in the Third Reich? What was in Japan? What was in the US? Aviation. These were piston engines, stars engines or V-shaped inline ones. All the artillery was almost the same. The production technologies of everything in general were the same. But we must pay tribute. The United States at that time was the most developed superpower in the scientific technological aspect. Therefore, their military equipment, in many respects, surpassed the military equipment of both allies and opponents. This does not mean that other military equipment was completely bad. If it had been completely bad, then it would have been impossible to fight. But nonetheless, there was some competition within one quality, and we are all lucky that Hitler was provoked into World War II before Germany was able to realize some scientific technological progress and reach a new quality, from the position of which everything that their opponents had would have been considered by the Reich as yesterday's, the day before yesterday's science and technology. But at the same time, despite the commonality of technologies for structural material solutions, the commonality of constructional materials, approaches to the design and production of objects of the technosphere in all countries, there were certain features, conditioned by the nraviousness and psychology of people, which were expressed in one way or another in their economic activity. But in order not to deal with small things, I will show only one example. There is an old Russian saying, "The thing can't be worn out." There is a psychology behind the saying that is incompatible with the current world of reckless consumerism, because this saying implies that a thing, firstly, must be convenient to use. That is, it must solve certain tasks for which it was created. It should not exert a harmful impact on the user and on those around the user. And its resource characteristics are embodied into the saying, "The thing can't be worn out." That is, made once and forever. This approach allows, with the correct organization of governance towards the economy, to satisfy the vital needs of everyone. But again, for this approach to be implemented, it requires not only a product resource, but it requires that it be prudently made and meet its intended purpose. And in addition, it requires that it be ergonomic. Because if you have "the thing can't be worn out," but it's impossible to use it because it does not solve the tasks for which it was created, or it solves the tasks, but at the same time, those who use it get tired, then the user will have the desire to get rid of this thing as soon as possible. And the other approach is simple. A thing is the latest cry of fashion. So if it is the latest cry of fashion this morning, this does not mean that the next latest cry of fashion will be in 6 months or so. Another latest cry of fashion may be tonight. Then the questions of resource indicators of the thing, issues of ergonomics, convenient usability of the thing, they don't even fade into the background. They completely lose their significance. Because look at the monitors you have now. In most cases, there is a black edge around the bright screen. But from the point of view of human physiology, this is anti-ergonomic, because the organism does not know how to open the pupil. If by the brightness of the black edge, then the pupil should be extremely open. Then the excessive brightness of the image will burn out the retina. If you close the pupil, so that the image is perceived normally, there will be psychological discomfort, because the surrounding environment is poorly perceived. However, most companies produce laptops and monitors with black screen edges, although nothing prevents them from releasing them in white, silver, pastel colors. In this case, there will not be this black edging around the bright screen, and the physiology of the organism will be more organic. And when working in front of this monitor, you will be able to keep your eyesight good for decades, even if you have to work for several hours a day, but not an hour or two, as doctors now recommend. This is what concerns the questions of ergonomics. As for the questions of purpose correspondence, by and large, this can be seen in the history of the UAZ vehicles. The GAZ-69 was a masterpiece. The UAZ-469 is already a non-correspondence to many requirements, and in particular, the UAZs that were in the service of the army of the GDR had upper sidewalls that hold the side glazing, not bolted down like ours, but on hinges going outwards. This made it possible, in conditions of danger, to open the sidewalls outwards, keeping weapons ready, and this in fact contributed to the high survivability in combat conditions of those guys who found themselves inside this UAZ. Patriot car also, by all appearances, is degrading as an SUV, not to mention the fact that making a flat floor with rear seats folded is an intellectually overwhelming task for designers, saying nothing of the fact that with such dimensions, this should be a 7 or a 9-seated modification, in which all passengers could feel comfortable. Well, let it even be on account of the fact that the trunk will be reduced. But sometimes families have such needs that the capacity of 5 people in a car is not enough. Well, and accordingly, if there is a violation of purpose consonance in the structure, a non-correspondence between the structure and the purposes, a violation of ergonomics, then the principle of the thing can't be worn out loses its relevance. But what the economy is attuned to, the thing can't be worn out, or the thing is the latest cry of fashion, this is determined neither by economic theories nor by something else. It is determined by the nraviousness and psychology of people. Therefore, quite a lot of time was devoted to what man is, how society is organized, what social institutions are, and how they are connected in this social organization. If you remember this whole business, maintain it in the relevant condition, then you can move on actually to economic questions. I will rely on this book, The Economics of Innovative Development. The Economics of Innovative Development is quite a thick book if you look at it from the one hand, but on the other hand, it is relatively thin if we talk about what happens there. As for the economic theories, the situation is that everything related to the governance of an enterprise in a market economy is described there more or less adequately. Any enterprise solves the problem of profitability, that is, expenditures in the course of activities should be less than income. The difference is profit. On what and how to spend this profit is the second question, because the profit can be used to create luxury for the owners, or it can be invested in the development of production, in its improvement in various aspects. But in any case, at the level of microeconomics of the enterprise, the task of profitability of this particular enterprise is solved, and its essence is simple. Income should be greater than expenditures. But everything that concerns the level of macroeconomic systems and mega-economic systems, textbooks on economic theory, are either filled with empty verbal fornication, or they give some particular facts, a selection of particular facts, and they somehow try to interpret them. But neither macroeconomics, that is, what is within the state, nor megaeconomics, the economy that unites the economic systems of many states up to humanity as a whole, are considered as objects of governance, because they have not mastered this. I'm telling you this not because I want to spend 2 hours sitting in front of the camera, the monitor, but in order to encourage at least a certain number of people to read the thick books, think over what they have read, correlate this with life, and in some way realize their creative potential. And then the question arises, what kind of connections are there between the micro level, what happens at the enterprise, the macro level, what happens in the economic system of the state, and the mega level, what happens in the international economy? So I pronounce such words as income, profit, expenses, and in general, these words imply the presence of money in circulation, the presence of a money account. Money likes to be counted. The counting of money is expressed in accounting. Moreover, please note that in the 19th century in Russia, such a word was used as счетовод, bookkeeper, that is, a person who keeps accounts. And as globalization progressed, the word accountant appeared, that is, bookholder, in translation from German, and the meaning in some way became not accessible to everyone, since foreign words should not invade the language in cases where there are quite adequate native words, which exactly determine the nature of the activity and the essence of things. And in fact, the main claims against the courses of economic theory are that they are not able to clearly connect with each other products in their finished form, which act in the market economy as goods and money. Therefore, talking about many processes that take place in the economy, both at the micro level and at the macro level, without understanding the essence of money and monetary circulation, is simply a waste of time. Well, earlier I said that a person can think in static episodes, or he can think in processes. Therefore, if we want to understand what the modern financial credit system is, for what it really serves, and what tasks it can serve in a differently organized society, in which a person is not an economic resource, but is one of the owners of the economy as a whole, then we must turn to the past. Well, in order to see the governorial processes behind the well-known facts, I say once again, you will have to read this book, The Economics of Innovative Development. And not only read it, but you will also have to understand this little picture, which is on the book cover, and is commented on, explained, in one of the chapters of the book, The Sufficiently General Theory of Governance, compiled materials of the training course in Applied Mathematics of Processes of Governance. There is a saying, it is not gold that the rich eat. The saying appeared in the days when gold was a type of money. Simply speaking, money won't make you full. There should be natural products that satisfy some of the needs of people. The ability of a product to satisfy some of the needs of people, according to the classic authors, is called use value. In my opinion, the term is stupid, because then the theoreticians, economists, move on to the questions of with what and how to measure it. Well, it's impossible to measure it in any way, because both the watch and the tomato that's in the kitchen, each of these objects satisfies some of the needs of people, and they are co-measurable neither directly nor indirectly in any way. These are different needs, incomparable with each other. The entire plurality of these needs form what in mathematics is usually called the basis of a multidimensional space. And on each axis of the basis, something can be compared with each other in relation to the ability to satisfy certain needs, and this is limited, because many tastes of people are different, and as folk wisdom again says, someone likes the priest, someone likes the priest's wife, and someone likes the priest's daughter. Nonetheless, needs are objective. Not all needs can be satisfied by natural products that nature provides in a ready-to-use form. A quite large number of needs, and in our time the overwhelming majority, requires that organizational, purpose-oriented activities, production activities, distribution, transportation, be organized in order for these needs to be satisfied. You can find the facts about which I will talk in different literature, and there is a book by A.V. Anikin which is called Gold. The book is very good. It contains a lot of facts related to different periods of the formation of the financial credit system. The only drawback of the book is that it doesn't consider the economy as an object of governance, and the financial credit system is not considered as a tool of governance. But I recommend that you find this book, download it and read it. You will learn a lot of interesting things. Well, if you are governorially literate, then you will understand from it a lot of things that it does not say. After such a long introduction, let us turn to what is behind the words of this book. What processes stand behind the words? Well, the first question. If there is a primitive community, does trade exist in it? Does the market exist? That is, one person acts as a seller and another person acts as a buyer. Well, in fact, single members of the community can trade in some way with each other on the theme that one owns something while the other wants something and wants to give something in trade. But in general, trade in the sphere of production, in the community, is impossible, because in a primitive community, there is a great leader, relatively speaking, and a great shaman. The community is characterized by the fact that in it, everyone knows each other. If something belongs to someone personally, then it's possible, but in general, many things are really common. Hence where the name community comes from. What stands behind this word? Well, the natural resources in the area, controlled by the community, are also common. If we talk about some kind of production activity within the community, then there is no need for trade, because the great leader and the great shaman know who can do what. Therefore, someone fishes, someone does something else, and then, when an aggregate communal product appears, the great leader and the great shaman know how to use it, for whom, what, and how. There is no need for trade as such. From the point of view of the sufficiently general theory of governance, the absence of the need for trade is conditioned by the fact that within the community, the governance towards product exchange is conditioned by a structural method, from a single center of governance, personified, figuratively speaking, by the great leader and the great shaman, who can sometimes be helped by those who are in the council of elders. But there is no need for trade as such. Everything is solved in a structural way, by issuing directive orders as to what to do, who should do it, when it should be done, in order to transfer the product of their labor for further processing or organization of storage. When does the need for trade arise? The need for trade arises when governing in a structural method on these principles of issuing personally directive-addressed orders, what to do, who should do it, when it should be done, becomes impossible. The main factor of impossibility is the numerical growth of the community to such a state where everyone ceases to know each other. And there is a purely psychological aspect. The center of governance is choking on the information that it needs in order to cover all aspects of the life of the controlled object and provide timely, life-consistent, and leading instructions, monitor the progress of their implementation. In primitive times, this kind of thing was solved simply. The community was divided, and there turned out to be two communities. Each vein relied on the structural method of governance towards production activities and product exchange within its boundaries. Trade as such, as a social process, as an element of the structure in it, in fact could not arise. The need for trade arises when directive-addressed governance towards product exchange becomes, for any reason, impossible. Something coveted is under the control of another center of governance, and we cannot issue there a directive-addressed instruction, give it to us. Or within a certain cultural community, the structural method of governance turns out to be functionally inoperable due to the absence of means of communication that provide the necessary performance speed of large flows of information, which the center is unable to process, and other reasons that lead to the impossibility of exercising governance in a structural way. The second reason for the emergence of trade is that what we want, we do not produce ourselves either at all or in sufficient for us quantities. As a result of this, our wants are not satisfied, and we want to satisfy them at the expense of some external sources. Well, external sources have the same situation, and if we produce an awl, and they produce soap, then there is an item for trade. How much soap can be obtained in exchange for one awl? If the production spectrum is the product nomenclature, plus the number of products for each item of the nomenclature. If they are identical in your case, primarily in terms of the product nomenclature, then there is no need to exchange dates for dates if they are of the same quality. Trading in this case is not possible. Therefore, in order for trade to arise, two factors are required. The first factor I named, the impossibility of governing a product exchange in a structural way. And the second factor is the non-correspondence, first of all in the nomenclature of products produced, and the lack of volumes of products in relation to one's own needs. These are the starting conditions in which the culture of society generated such a process as trade. Further questions arise about what is traded and how. Well, look at primitive times at the dawn of civilizational formation. There is no financial credit system. You do not have a bank card, you do not have a paper ruble, or a paper dollar. And even if you appear with a dollar in some primitive market, then they won't understand you there. What will they understand there? There they will only understand that a certain product is made by you. It is attractive to those who do not produce it at all, or do not produce it in the quantities they need, and they want to get this product. Well, your mentality is almost the same. You don't know what a dollar is. You have produced something. Meanwhile, others have what you would like. But you either don't produce it at all, or you don't produce it in the necessary for you quantities. It is from this moment that trading begins. How does it start? You must find a common language and agree with the owners of the goods that you want to obtain. You have to agree about transferring to him some of your goods, which you consider to be either excessive for yourself or which you can sacrifice. And here comes the first bummer. You want something, but he doesn't want what you have. He doesn't need it for some reason. What to do? Well, as you know, there were no hypermarkets, but there were marketplaces. A marketplace is a place within the boundaries of transport accessibility of that era, where at a certain time, people gathered in order to transfer part of their products to others, and, in exchange, take part of their products from them. To put it differently, there are not two people in the market, two legal entities, or whatever you want to name it, but there is a certain plurality of them. And so, if direct product exchange is impossible, then we must look for a chain. You find someone who needs your product, you get it, you find the next person who needs this product, you get another product in exchange for this one, and so if you build a chain in such a way that it ends with the fact that the owner of that which you really want to get gets what he wants, and in this case the deal takes place, everyone leaves satisfied. Well, at least you leave satisfied because you get what you want. And the owner of the product you receive also gets what he wants. Here the question arises, how many links will there be in this chain? Well, ideally there will be no intermediate sellers-buyers, and the two of you agree and leave amicably. Well, in the worst case, you will not be able to complete this chain by transferring some intermediate goods to the owner of the product that you want to get. That is, you come to the marketplace, bring something, and leave with what you brought. So you can't get what you want. In other words, the performance speed of the system of such exchange trading and the predictability of its functioning is at an extremely low level and does not satisfy the needs of everyone. There is another approach. The approach is clear from the point of view of modern mathematics. You can enter all the goods put up for exchange trade into the table. This table will contain the nomenclature of these goods horizontally and vertically. And then you just need to evaluate the probability of exchange, or the real statistics of the exchange of each of these goods for other goods. When this work is done, you will see that among all the abundance of goods, there are a certain number of the most easily exchangeable. That is, the probabilities of exchanging any goods for these goods are the highest. And since the moment those going to the marketplace were able to select these goods from the general set of all goods, since that moment, money appeared. In fact, everything is simple. Money, in its physical form, at the time of its appearance, had two qualities. It was useful by itself as goods, and secondly, almost anything that appeared on the market could be exchanged for it, if not directly, then with a minimum number of direct product exchange transactions in the physical form. And since that time, as noted, there appeared another branch of production, the production of monetary product, not in order to consume it, but in order to go with it to the market. And having this monetary product, it was easy and simple to carry out sales and purchase transactions and obtain what one really needed. Then the question arises about the proportions of exchange. Well, in fact, an analog of such a direct product exchange now also exists, and the internet allows such a product exchange. There is a known case. Whether it is true or not is an open question, but nevertheless a plausible case. The case where one man put up an ordinary paperclip for exchange, and after a while he already exchanged something for a quite decent house. Shortly speaking, I mean that the proportions of the exchange are set subjectively. Factors such as labor costs for production and the approximate equality of labor costs for the production of one product and labor costs for the production of another product, which in a pair are exchanged for each other, are already inventions of economists of subsequent eras. Because, yes, of course, when you put a certain product on sale, you understand that you can sacrifice it in order to get something else. And the evaluations of what you can sacrifice and what you cannot sacrifice are primarily subjective. Yes, behind them, somewhere in the depths of your soul, there are your own ideas about how much you need to work. But in order to know how much you need to work, you should understand the first question. Where is zero, the start of work? The answer to this question is more or less realistic only for standard, well-known types of activities, when you can say that it will take you approximately such and such a time to dig a ditch of a certain depth in certain soil. And for this ditch, you want to get this and this much money. On the other hand, a person who buys a ditch from you also evaluates how long it would take him to make this ditch, to dig it on his own and not pay anything. Yes, such evaluations exist. Yes, they make up statistics. Yes, the so-called labor theory of value is built on this, but only standard jobs, in which there is no creativity, fit into the labor theory of value. Now there is such a plant called the Sredny Nevsky shipyard. When it came into existence, it was called differently, Ust-Izhora yard, since the plant is located near the mouth of the Izhora River in the vicinity of St. Petersburg. When the plant was being built, it was assumed that destroyers of the Novik type would be built in it, and therefore the slipways had to withstand about 1,500 tons of the load of the hull under construction. Slipways, building places where ships are built, must withstand this load, and structurally, these are first of all piles, which take the weight of the hull and transfer it to the soil. Alexei Nikolaevich Krylov was invited as a consultant to the builders of Ust-Izhora yard. Alexei Nikolaevich looked at the drawings of the slipways and recommended changing the pile driving scheme, as a result of which the number of piles was sharply reduced, the bearing capacity of the slipways more than doubled. And Alexei Nikolaevich told the person who had invited him as a consultant about this. For one consultation, he actually covered the cost of all his consulting, and everything further was net profit. If we talk about the labor theory of value, then the question arises, how many hours, minutes did it take for Alexei Nikolaevich to evaluate this? And why initially were the designers, also qualified engineers, not able to find the best scheme for driving piles to construct the slipways? According to the labor theory of value, in fact, such a situation is impossible, because if the design engineers of the plant are designing, then the piles must be in place and provide the maximum bearing capacity of the slipways. But nonetheless, this episode happened. Therefore, forget about labor theory of value. In reality, two factors take shape in pricing, and only after the appearance of money. The cost price of production, that is, all the costs associated with the production of the final product, plus the cost price of the producer's claim for profit. And now the producer enters the market with this, with the cost price and the claim for profit. The buyer is not interested in the question of production, the cost price. The buyer is interested in only two questions. Does the thing satisfy some of his needs, or does it not? If it satisfies, then does he have enough money to pay? If he has enough money, and from his point of view the price is acceptable, then he will pay, as a result of which the producer will make a profit. If not enough, then there will be trade. Will you sell it to me for a lower price? And here there is also the seller's subjectivism. Will there be at least some profit, or a price lower than the cost price offered by the buyer, and accordingly will there be only loss? Well, what kind of loss in a number of cases is acceptable? Because to receive some working capital instead of not having any at all, to get at least part of the cost price, in some difficult market situations, it may be the lesser of evils, as opposed to not selling the product at all. Therefore, the thing is that since the moment that money appeared, trade has been primarily a financial quotation. From the point of view of the producer of the products, the cost price of production and the claim for profit are involved in the financial quotation. From the point of view of the potential buyer, he is only interested in the fact that the price is within the limits of his purchasing power and does not infringe on any of his other interests if he buys this product. Well, as I already said, the labor theory of value is applicable only to standard, well-known types of work, where you can clearly fix the beginning and the end of working time, the production cycle. And in cases where labor is of a creative character, and creativity is always subjective, the beginning cannot always be fixed, just as it is not always possible to fix the end of the production cycle. In his memoirs, Alexei Nikolaevich Krylov gives another example on the theme of the inconsistency of the labor theory of value. It was after the revolution, when Soviet Russia ordered steam locomotives in Sweden and Germany. It is not excluded that this was one of those grandiose schemes of the early 20th century, because the price of these steam locomotives was incredible. But one of the explanations is that in this way debts were returned to the sponsors of the revolution. But this is not the point. The point is that it was necessary to buy or build steamers on which these steam locomotives from Sweden and Germany could be delivered to Russia. The organization of the transportation of steam locomotives was headed by Alexei Nikolaevich Krylov. And in one of the shipping offices he saw a model of the steamer. This steamer was distinguished by the fact that it consumed an unbelievable amount of coal and barely crawled. Krylov looked at the model of the steamer and asked the owner, "Tell me, is the model made precisely?" The owner replied, "Yes, I suppose the model is made precisely." The next words of Krylov were, "When you put her in the dark for painting, cut the propeller blades by 8 to 9 inches. The owner of the steamer asked who had given such advice and received an answer as to who it was. He followed the recommendation. The propeller blades were cut down, the coal consumption decreased, the speed increased. And he found Krylov in order to thank him and asked the question, "How much do I owe you for this?" Krylov answered, "It's enough for me that you came and told me about the results." The question was, "How did you guess?" I have been teaching shipbuilding at the Academy for 30 years. Well, if we approach this question with the labor theory of value, how long did it take to find a solution to the problem of this unfortunate steamer? 30 years from the moment Krylov began teaching, or 50 years from the moment he began to study, or a few minutes while he looked at this model of the steamer and talked about her problems with the owner. This is about the theme, that the labor theory of value is inapplicable, although everyone is convinced that it really works. Now let's get back to what was on the market. There was such a Babylonian king, Hammurabi. Historians believe that the first written code is that of King Hammurabi. The code of legislation also regulated trade. According to the code of Hammurabi, payments in silver and payments in grain were recognized as legal. Well, there was a certain exchange rate between silver and grain. And returning to what I said about the exchange trade, then silver and grain are products of the money group. It is money. But they are also useful in themselves. Well, if it is difficult to talk about the benefits of silver in those days, why it was attractive and became a product of the money group, this is an open question. But everything is clear about the benefits of grain. Grain is a biogenic energy carrier, and the production capabilities of any society before the beginning of the era of technogenic energy were determined by how many people and livestock one could feed. If we agree with this, then the amount of grain as the main food product for many people and for livestock, and for a person with a sedentary lifestyle and the development of a sedentary civilization, this is certainly the case for a long time, grain was the main energy carrier. Therefore, it is not surprising that the Code of Hammurabi recognized payments in grain as legal and considered grain as a type of money. Well, silver is one of the precious metals, and now we sometimes hear that there is inflation. Let's get back to gold circulation. Anikin, in the book Gold, mentioned the following fact. After America was discovered during the 16th century, prices in Spain in gold terms increased by about 3 times. And after centuries, prices in the rest of Europe also increased by 3 times or so. Let's look at the reasons for this fact. When America was discovered, the Spaniards began to rob it. Gold was exported to Spain from America in mind-boggling quantities for its time. And what were the productive capacities of the Spanish economy? They changed little over the 15th century, because they were based on the manual labor of people, a certain number of windmills, a certain amount of working and non-working livestock. But at the heart of everything is the productivity of horticulture, because with a sedentary lifestyle, horticulture is the basis of civilization, and products of horticulture were used to feed working and non-working livestock and to feed people. If the productivity of horticulture did not increase many times, so that it was possible to feed a larger number of working livestock, a greater number of artisans, then the mass of goods by the end of the 16th century did not differ much, even taking into account the scientific technological progress of that era, from the mass of goods of the beginning of the 16th century. If we talk not about the subjects of speculation, but really about what people need in their lives. And the amount of money, thanks to the export of gold from America, approximately tripled. Well, as a result, the excessive money in the circulation system led to a rise in prices by about 3 times. That is, historically, the first inflation in the history of the present civilization was gold. And it was conditioned precisely by the fact that the excessive money supply in relation to the mass of goods, if we evaluate it in constant prices of the late 15th, early 19th centuries, led to a rise in prices. And further, if you look into history, you can trace such a thing, that in European countries a certain amount of silver and gold expressed itself either in jewelry, dinnerware sets, jewelry and the like, or expressed itself in the money supply. Moreover, since the number of precious metals in use by society was approximately the same, there were fluctuations when jewelry was made from money, and after some time the dinnerware sets were minted into coins. So this whole thing went on this way. But again, if we look back to monetary goods in their physical form, livestock, grain, precious metals, livestock needs service costs as money supply. Therefore, it is not very convenient. With grain, the picture is somewhat better. But granaries must be built wisely, otherwise grain will be unusable and will not be able to perform either the monetary functions or the functions of an energy carrier. Further, it turns out that grain is valuable, but the value of grain is expressed in large volumes and large masses, and precious metals are free from the shortcomings of both grain and livestock as money, since the costs of storage, ensuring their functionality, are minimal, even not always necessary security. If no one knows that it is somewhere, it lies somewhere until it's in demand. On the other hand, if you are going somewhere far away for shopping, then carrying several carts of grain with you is also problematic. It is also a cost. With precious metals, everything is easier. And in general, you need to understand that a gold or silver chain is, first of all, a wallet. Because if it hangs around the neck or around the belly, then it is quite difficult to lose it. And secondly, to unrivet a link is technically not difficult, and riveting a chain after removing several links from it, this is also technically not difficult. Therefore, during long journeys, the chain, like a wallet, is functional. And only later does the chain become a piece of jewelry, losing the function of a wallet. Well, then let's look at what happened after precious metals became money. What does the primitive market look like, where precious metals are already money? You come to the market with some pig. You agree on a price. After that, you need a hammer and a chisel in order to chop off some of the precious metal. Then you need a scale. Then it turns out that the seller may doubt the quality of this silver, and that your scales are really reliable, and that the weight you declare is true. If he suggests weighing on his own scales, then you too may doubt that his scales are true. Therefore, a character appears on the market, which can be conditionally called an assayer. An assayer sits in the market with his own scales and evaluates the quality of precious metals. And for this service, he charges you or the seller a certain amount of the same precious metals. What does the assayer do in the market? The assayer sells his honesty in the market, because if he is not honest, then many sellers and buyers will have a lot of claims against him, and he is unlikely to survive under the burden of these claims. Therefore, the assayer sells his honesty in the market. Then some more time passes, and what is called the state treasury appears. What does the state treasury do? The state treasury mints coins. To put it another way, if initially all the forging and pressing works were carried out during the purchase and sale transaction, now the purchase and sale transaction is provided with standard coins. And this circumstance means that in fact, before the appearance of credit money, notes on which a certain denomination is written, all trade in the history of European civilization was barter trade, and was carried out according to the principle: product number 1, money; product number 2, money gold. But the difference between gold or silver as an intermediary product, in the form of coins in the physical form, is as follows. When the forging and pressing work was carried out in the market during the sale and purchase transaction, this was about the same as the difference between the purchase of tomatoes by weight in the market. Please give me this one, that one, and buying a package of tomatoes in a supermarket. If we consider the development of the monetary system as such, then the development went in the direction of increasing the performance speed. Well, the first step is the singling out of goods of the monetary group, which in themselves have some kind of usefulness and therefore are in demand. Money appears. Further, the singling out of precious and semi-precious metals from the goods of the monetary group, which in themselves have some usefulness and are also in demand. Next is the appearance of coins. The appearance of coins eliminated the forging and pressing work on the market, eliminated the character called the assayer, and somewhat accelerated the exchange of goods. But along with the singling out of the goods of the monetary group, speculation, usury as a type of activity, and speculation appeared almost immediately. Why did speculation appear? Because if we turn to the timing of prices in the market, there were both seasonal fluctuations and price fluctuations caused by both natural and some kind of social turmoil. If there are price fluctuations, and they are of a certain natural character, then to some extent they are predictable, and accordingly you can buy something for cheap, wait a while, and sell it at a higher price. You have a profit. If this profit is enough to ensure your existence throughout the entire time interval from purchase to sale, then it becomes a commercially profitable enterprise, and you can do it for a long time. The speculative sector appeared thanks to money. Usury, the same. If someone does not have enough money to complete a transaction, then he can borrow some from someone. Then the question arises, on what conditions? If people know each other, and this is mutual assistance, then maybe it's not even borrowing, but a gift of these amounts. But since the market is somehow connected with commerce, then you can engage in such an activity as usury. Here you have this and this amount of money, but in a while you give me back a little more. If this usurious income allows you to live, then this can also become a commercial activity. The question is logical. Where can I get more from? But it is your problem. Run your business efficiently and everything will be fine. This is how the modern monetary system took shape. With it are connected the speculative sector and a type of speculative sector, usury. What happens further? Further, it turns out that if you are carrying some kind of product, it may be of interest to robbers, land or even sea pirates. If you are carrying money in the form of precious metals, then it can also be of interest to robbers, and accordingly the question arises, how to deprive the robbers of interest, since security guards are also a cost of transporting goods. Among other things, robbers can also be hired as guards. That is, it is at the discretion of the owner of the product. Either we are robbers, or we are Cossack guards. But the guards can also be tempted. Therefore, in fact, ideally, you have to deprive the robbers of interest. Well, if not completely, then to a large extent. Further, there appear all kinds of IOUs, both registered and unnamed, and to the bearer. To the bearer is not very good, since a robber can also act as a bearer. But with registered ones, the situation is different. That is, subject number 1 gives money to a certain money keeper and receives a receipt from him, with which he goes to another settlement, goes to the local money keeper. The local money keeper makes sure that the receipt is genuine, and the bearer of it, especially if his name matches, can get a certain amount of money. Well, it's clear that such an operation is also subject to a certain commission. But another means of payment appears, a certain receipt with a denomination value, that the money in such and such an amount is equivalent to this receipt. Next, there are treasury bills, banknotes, that is, pieces of paper with denomination values. Initially, the difference is that treasury bills are the state treasury, and banknotes are a product of the activities of comrades usurers, who in most cases were independent from the state and formed parallel communities in society. Well, in general, on the market, such debt obligations are formalized in one way or another. They quite successfully act as a means of payment, along with money in its physical form of precious metals, be it in the form of ingots, sand, scrap gold or silver, or standard coins. So it is important to understand the following thing. Except for this episode, with the export of astronomical for its era amounts of gold and silver from America, the amount of money supply in physical form, gold, silver, or semi-precious copper, is limited, or grows relatively slowly, changes slowly. Therefore, with the exception of that time, the amount of money in circulation is almost an objective given. It changes slowly. But from the moment paper money appears, from that moment the question arises, how much to print and put into circulation? The answer to this question was given in the form of the gold standard. That is, there is a denomination value on a piece of paper. There are some statistics on the exchange of gold in one form or another for these pieces of paper with denomination values and the pieces of paper with denomination values for gold. So far, stocks of precious metals in the bank or in the treasury allow exchanging without queuing and without problems. Everything seems to be fine. The financial credit system is functioning. Coins, ingots, and various kinds of receipts, IOUs, also work as money. But if there is some kind of panic in society, or too much paper has been printed, then inflation starts again. Prices rise, and people want to invest in some real value, because the purchasing power of paper money, which is absolutely useless outside of purchase and sale transactions, well, maybe they're of interest to some numismatics, like Reichsmarks now. Yes, for numismatics, the Reichsmark has some collectible value. Yes, it has some value according to what happens in the numismatics market. But if you find a box with pieces of paper on which there is an eagle with a swastika, then there is nothing to do on the market with these pieces of paper as a means of payment, simply because the Third Reich ceased to exist and its pieces of paper are not backed by anything. Gold with the hallmark of the Reichsbank is still of interest to a quite large number of people, although not to the entire society. Therefore, the question is, how much money to print? What I am going to say now will be fully understandable after we talk about intersectoral balances, interregional balances, balance models and everything else related to this in the next lectures. You can introduce such a concept of invariant of the price current. The invariant of the price current is a product, the quantity of which is measured by the prices of all other products on the market. That is, the price current takes us back to the era when there was no speculative sector of the economy and when all the goods that were on the market were somehow useful on their own. That is, the price current is primarily useful as something because it satisfies some of the needs of people. And now again, if we look at the economy as a tool for satisfying the needs of people in products and services, then the production volumes of everything are determined by the formula concerning the energy conversion efficiency. From any system, a useful effect can be obtained in quantity. The energy conversion efficiency that you input into the system, this applies to the economy. In order to increase the supply of goods with existing technologies, you must double, or not double but somewhat increase, the energy supply capacity of the production system. Then some new production capacities will be created. And again, it all comes down to how much energy you can use in technology and logistics in order to produce a product and deliver it to the consumer. So if we introduce the concept of invariant of the price current, then in ancient times, grain, according to the laws of Hammurabi, was one invariant of the price current. Another one, according to the laws of Hammurabi, was silver. Under the conditions of the gold standard, the invariant of the price current is gold. But if we correlate with the needs of people for products as such, then we must choose the energy invariant of the price current. And then you can come to such a concept as the energy standard of the means of payment. The energy standard, on one side of the scale, you have the entire mass of goods, and on the other side of the scale, the energy that is needed to produce this mass of goods. But the mass of goods is in some way estimated in denomination values. Therefore, from that scale, you can remove the mass of goods and put the money supply, that is, the sum of the denomination value of all means of payment that is in circulation. The ratio of the denomination values of all means of payment that are in circulation, taking into account the notorious credit multiplier to energy, this is the energy standard. How to choose it in concrete terms, to correlate it with the capacity of a power plant, or with the volume of oil production minus exports, these are minor details. The main thing is to understand that the volumes of production and consumption are conditioned by the energy potential, and accordingly you come to the concept of energy standard of means of payment. Then it turns out that since the energy potential grows slowly, technologies improve slowly. Technologies are improving, the energy conversion efficiency of the system is increasing. Then you can quickly print money. And since the mass of goods does not grow, or grows slowly, then your prices will rise, so that all denominations emitted by you into circulation function as a means of payment. Another variant. You launch new energy capacities, improve technologies, improve the organization, but you do not print money. What will happen then? If there are no factors in the financial credit system that are artificially aimed at increasing prices, there are no generators of price increases, then you will get a system in which, as production grows and people's needs are satisfied, prices will progressively decrease. Well, for those who live now, this is unreal. But the economy of the USSR in post-war times worked in a mode of progressive annual decline in prices, in accordance with how much the production capacity grew and the needs of people were satisfied. To put it differently, these are questions of emission of credit policy. What would you like? Rising prices? Then a certain number of people will flourish, such as Pavel Ivanovich Chichikov and Ostap Ibrahimovich Bender. Or do you want everyone to live better year after year? And then the emission lags somewhat behind the growth of production and the dynamics of satisfaction of social needs. In this case, there is an incentive to work for the system. But people like Pavel Ivanovich Chichikov, Geshe Kazadoyev, Dima from the Soviet movie Beware of the Car, they get bored in the system and they want to return to a system in which the speculative sector and usury dominate the productive sector, and accordingly the elite of society are those who live on the speculative sector, and those who work in the real sector, as producers, are simply economic resources that are controlled by the governing elite. From the moment paper money, as a carrier of denominations of monetary amounts, ousted money metals, it has, in fact, been easy to draw a conclusion related to the question of how much money is in the financial credit system. There are two answers to these questions. Answer number one, we can ask the central bank how much money has been emitted. The central bank answers if you have the authority to ask such a question. The central bank can answer honestly, and then its answer is correct, and you know that in the financial credit system there is such and such an amount of money, taking into account the credit multiplier. But there is a second answer. In the financial credit system, money is always 100%. This 100% is only in some way expressed in denominations, and their shares are distributed among wallets and current accounts of physical and legal entities. What is the difference between both answers? They are both correct. The difference is that when you go into consideration of all the financial economic processes in the financial credit system, in which there is always 100%, then everything falls back into its place, and any fraud with denominations, including fraud with denominations on the part of the central bank, becomes impossible. And the opportunity opens up for the state to acquire financial sovereignty. That is, the state consciously approaches an imitation, realizing that those 100% are expressed in denominations. The state consciously builds a credit policy, emissional policy, consciously builds legislation on financial economic activities that determine tax rates, subsidy rates for producers in different sectors and regions, subsidy rates for certain consumers. And in this case, financial economic sovereignty is possible. But the main thing is that there opens a transition to the financial credit system, in which there is always 100% of money, which is only expressed in denominations, and if you allow usury, then the entire purchasing power of society unidirectionally flows into the property of the usurer, the aggregate usurer. Therefore, the central bank becomes a state within a state that lives its own life and does not care at all about everything that happens in the state. The country will live in conditions of tyranny and usury, and all the subterfuges connected with usury and manifestations of speculative activity, not in the production but parasitic sector of the economy, will look beneficial, since denominations, profit in the real sector, or profit in the usurious sector, well, factually, no difference is seen. It's all the same. It's a commercial success. Money doesn't smell. But life in such a society is shitty. However, this is only the history of how money appeared, how it evolved, how modern financial credit systems were formed. Everything else is impossible to understand without mathematical models. Therefore, today's lecture is, to be short, about what money is, where it came from, how it evolved, how it relates to the reality of production and the reality of consumption. Well, and the prerequisites for thinking about what to do with it further on and how. That's all for today. Until next time.